You think you understand the cross, but what if the most powerful symbol of your faith holds a hidden meaning you've never fully seen? Because the cross is not just where Jesus died, it's where everything about your life, identity, and destiny was decided, where eternity touched earth and hell was publicly stripped of its power. And the shocking truth is that the cross was never a defeat, was a setup for the greatest spiritual reversal in history. You've been taught to see the cross as a place of sorrow, but heaven sees it as the turning point where justice and mercy collided, where wrath and love embraced, where God didn't just forgive you, He exchanged your sin for His righteousness. And this exchange wasn't symbolic, it was literal, spiritual, eternal. What you may not realize is that when Jesus said, "It is finished," He wasn't just talking about His suffering. He was declaring the legal cancellation of your spiritual debt, the completion of every prophetic promise, and the irreversible defeat of every demonic power set against you. The cross is not a decoration or religious icon, a courtroom, a battlefield, and a doorway all at once. And standing beneath it means standing in the very place where curses are broken, strongholds are shattered, and chains of generational bondage begin to fall. The enemy hopes you keep looking at the cross through human eyes, seeing only pain and blood, because once you see it through revelation, once you realize the cross was God's weapon of mass redemption, you become unstoppable, unshakable, untouchable by the lies that once had you bound. Here's the hidden layer. The cross was also your execution. The old you was nailed there with Christ. Your fears, your shame, your addictions, your secrets buried in His death, which means resurrection isn't just something Jesus experienced. It's your reality now, but only if you've died with Him first. That's why the enemy fights so hard to distract you with religion, rituals, and surface-level Christianity. Because if you ever fully step into what the cross truly purchased, you'd stop living like a victim and start walking like a child of the King. Too many believers cling to the idea that the cross is only about forgiveness. But forgiveness was just the beginning through the cross. Jesus didn't just cleanse you. He transferred you from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. And that means you don't fight for victory, you fight from victory. Every spiritual battle, every temptation, every fear you face now is under the shadow of the cross, where Jesus already won. And the only way the enemy can keep you bound is if you forget what the cross actually did. The blood that ran down that wood wasn't just a sacrifice, it was a weapon. It was heaven's war cry, a divine invasion launched through surrender. And every drop carried the authority to silence the accuser, to cancel your shame, and to open a door to the Father that no man can shut. And when you live with a revelation of that, you stop bowing to fear, you stop agreeing with shame, and you begin to walk like someone who knows they've been bought, redeemed, and sealed for something greater than just surviving this life. The cross is more than an event in history. It is a spiritual portal through which everything changes. And if you've been stuck, if you've felt powerless, it's probably because you've been looking at the cross as something Jesus did for you, rather than something he did with you. You were crucified with him. And until you see your old nature buried in that moment, you'll keep resurrecting what Jesus already killed. But here's where it gets even deeper on that cross. Jesus wasn't just taking on sin. He was absorbing every curse ever spoken over your bloodline, every sickness, every mental torment, every identity wound, and every generational weight you were never meant to carry. And in that divine exchange, he gave you access to wholeness, clarity, peace, and identity that this world can't counterfeit. But if you don't know that, if you don't take hold of it, you'll keep living, saved, but stuck heaven-bound, but spiritually silenced. And God didn't put his Son on a cross just so you could live quiet, defeated, or distracted. He did it so you could rise in the same power that raised Christ from the dead. The kind of power that breaks addictions, heals memories, restores marriages, and awakens the dead things in your soul. And the final layer of this hidden meaning is this: the cross, A's and T, just your past, it. S, your daily place of alignment, because Jesus said, "Take up your cross daily and follow me." Meaning, the cross isn't a one-time encounter, but a lifestyle of surrender. Death to ego and rebirth into divine purpose. And if you've been wondering why your spiritual life feels dry, or why breakthrough hasn't, commit may be because you've skipped the altar, avoided the death, and tried to live resurrected without being crucified first. And that S, the secret many will never tell you. The cross still costs you something. It costs your pride, your idols, your self-will, and everything you've used to numb the ache that only God's presence can truly heal. You can't walk in resurrection power if you refuse to visit your own cross, because the place of death is also the place of release. What you surrender, God sanctifies. What you bury in Christ, God resurrects in glory. And the enemy knows that the cross is where your old nature dies and your real authority begins. Which is why he tries to keep you comfortable, passive, and distracted, treating the cross like a distant memory instead of a daily miracle. And the tragic truth is that many people wear the cross around their necks, but never carry it in their hearts. The cross is not an ornament, it's an assignment, a reminder that you've been called to crucify your flesh, silence the lies of the enemy, and walk in the Spirit. And the more you draw near to it, the more your life begins to take shape in alignment with heaven's blueprint. And here's what most believers miss. The cross was also a courtroom where a divine exchange took place. Your guilt for His innocence, your shame for His honor, your chaos for His peace, and your rejection for His adoption. And that means you no longer trying to earn God's approval, you living from it. Your identity isn't formed by your past, your trauma, or what others did to you. It was nailed to the wood where Jesus was hung. And the more you understand that, the more free you become to live without fear, without comparison, and without needing validation from a world that didn't create you. But this kind of revelation doesn't come through routine religion. It comes through divine intimacy. Through spending time at the foot of the cross until the weight of what happened there breaks you open in the best way, exposing the things in you that still need to die, and inviting you into the kind of healing that therapy alone can reach and success will never provide. The hidden power of the cross is that it creates a portal between who you were and who you were always meant to become. And standing in that space means acknowledging the cost. Because grace was never cheap, it was purchased with blood, and every drop of that blood still speaks, declaring your freedom, your value, and your unshakable place in God's family. And yet too often you live beneath that truth, as if Jesus didn't finish the work, as if your worth is still negotiable. But the cross already settled that you were worth dying for, worth rescuing, worth redeeming, and no voice in hell can change that fact. But walking in that kind of boldness requires crucifying the fear of man, the addiction to performance, and the subtle pride that says you can fix yourself without surrender. And the cross violently opposes every false gospel that tells you to do more, be more, hustle more, because at the cross, Jesus did what you never could. And resting in that truth is the most powerful spiritual posture you can take. And here's something few talk about. The cross was the ultimate act of spiritual warfare, a moment so dangerous to the kingdom of darkness that Satan tried to stop it before it happened. Through Herod's massacre of babies, through temptations in the wilderness, and through betrayal in Gethsemane. Because hell knew that once the blood touched the ground, it was over. And that same power flows through you today. But only if you live crucified, surrendered, and aware of what the blood has accomplished. It wasn't just a payment, it was a declaration of war, a signal that God's kingdom had invaded earth and nothing would be the same again. And yet, many Christians still live in chains because they honor the cross intellectually, but avoid it personally. They want the blessing without the bleeding, the power without the pruning, and the victory without the death. But God doesn't resurrect what you refuse to crucify. If you want the fullness of what Jesus paid for, you have to step out of lukewarm faith and embrace the fire that the cross demands. Because it's in that fire that gold is refined, calling is awakened, and real authority is forged. And every breakthrough you're praying for, every healing, every deliverance, every spiritual promotion is connected to this question. Have you gone to the cross, or are you just circling around it? Because you can't conquer what you refuse to crucify. And you can't carry resurrection power while dragging around the corpse of your old self. The truth is, God is calling you deeper, not into more striving, but into more surrender. And He's not waiting for you to be perfect, just willing, just hungry, just desperate enough to say, God, I want everything Jesus died for, not just heaven one day, but victory right now, freedom right now, transformation right now. And that cry authentic, raw, and surrendered. What moves heaven? Because the cross was never about behavior modification. It was about total heart renovation, a supernatural surgery that replaces stone with flesh and fear with faith. And that is what the enemy doesn't want you to discover. The moment you truly encounter the cross, everything begins to unravel, not in chaos, but in clarity. Because what once defined you begins to fall off. What once controlled you loses its grip. And what once shamed you can no longer speak with authority over your life. Because the cross doesn't just deal with your sin, disarms your accuser. Colossians 2:14-15 says, Jesus canceled the written code that was against you and nailed it to the cross, making a public spectacle of the powers of darkness, triumphing over them in it. Which means every lie, every generational curse, every spiritual attack that has haunted your bloodline, Jesus exposed it and broke its legal hold over you at Calvary. But if you don't know that, you'll keep living like a prisoner with the key already in your hand, locked in a cell that's already been opened, tormented by chains that were snapped the moment Christ said, "It is finished." And here's the part no one talks about. The cross is offensive to your flesh because it exposes the illusion that you can save your sin or negotiate your healing, when in reality, the cross demands full surrender, full exposure, and full trust in a God who bleeds for you. It's not clean or comfortable, messy, humiliating, and painful. In that mess is where your true freedom begins. And if you've been wondering why your life feels stuck spiritually, why it feels like you're circling the same wilderness again and again, it might be because you've approached the cross for forgiveness, but not for transformation. Too many people want the blood to cover their sins, but they don't want it to cleanse their idols. And so they cling to the habits, the comforts, the secret agreements with darkness that feel familiar even while crying out for breakthrough. But the cross doesn't coexist with compromise, it consumes it. And the fire that fell on the altar of sacrifice still falls on surrendered hearts today. And here is a truth that may sting. The cross wasn't meant to improve your life, was meant to end your life, so that a new one could begin. One hidden in Christ, shaped not by culture or fear or self-preservation, but by the Spirit of the living God dwelling within you. You weren't called to be better. You were called to be crucified, and only then can you be raised up in the image of the Son. Not just in theory, but in tangible, undeniable power. The hidden meaning of the cross is not just that Jesus died, it's that He took everything that ever stood between you and God, everything that ever tried to name you, claim you, or shame you, and crushed it beneath His obedience, His purity, His love. And when you walk with that awareness, you stop living in reaction to your past and begin living in response to His victory. You stop negotiating with demons and start enforcing the finished work of the cross. Because you were not saved to survive, you were saved to reign. But reigning starts at dying, and until you embrace the beauty of that death, you'll never taste the fullness of resurrection life. And let's be honest, dying hurts, surrender hurts, confession hurts, but it's the pain that births power, and what you bury at the cross, God resurrects in glory. But you can't take shortcuts. You can't fake surrender. You can't bypass the altar and expect to walk in fire, because the cross demands everything. But it also gives everything. And when Jesus stretched His arms wide, He was sown to just absorbing wrath. He was opening the gates to a kingdom that cannot be shaken, inviting you into a life where guilt no longer defines you, fear no longer enslaves you, and shame no longer silences you. The hidden meaning of the cross is that it is not only a place of death, as a birthing ground for purpose, for identity, for legacy. And what you allow to die there becomes the seed of your future anointing. The oil that will run from your obedience, the testimony that will break chains off others. But none of it happens until you stop resisting the death the cross requires. Because what feels like the end is actually the beginning. What feels like loss is actually gain. And what looks like defeat is actually the doorway to destiny. So the question is not whether Jesus paid enough. He did, fully and finally. The question is whether you'll live like it. The cross was not just God's solution to sin, it was His strategy for transformation. And if you've only approached it as a one-time event, you've missed the invitation into a daily encounter that reshapes everything you thought defined you. The hidden meaning is that the cross is not only about what Jesus did, but about what He continues to do through you. Because every time you lay your pride on that altar, every time you surrender the idol you cling to in secret. Every time you say, "Not my will, but yours be done." The power of the cross is activated again, not in symbolism, but in reality. And the reason so many live with surface-level change is because they try to apply grace without embracing death. They want healing without breaking, restoration without repentance, and calling without cost. But the cross doesn't work like that. There's no crown without a cross, no breakthrough without brokenness, and no fire without first being laid bare. And what no one tells you is that the cross isn't just about exposure, because you can't be truly healed from what you're still hiding. And the blood of Jesus doesn't just cover sin, it cleanses it, removes it, annihilates its power to define you ever again. And yet, many still walk like they're under the old verdict, listening to the same old lies that were nailed to the tree 2,000 years ago. The enemy thrives in your ignorance, hoping you treat the cross like a historical event instead of a living invitation. Because once you understand its ongoing power, you stop living like a spiritual orphan and start walking like a redeemed son or daughter of the King. You stop begging God to do what He already accomplished and start declaring it with the boldness of someone who knows their name is written in heaven. And maybe you've been asking God for deliverance, for purpose, for clarity. To kneel again at the cross, not with guilt, but with expectancy. Not with shame, but with surrender. To let the weight of glory fall on the same altar where Christ offered Himself fully for you. And this time, you're not just remembering the crucifixion, you're participating in it. Saying, "Lord, I lay down my agenda, my fear, my past, my reputation, my need to control, my addiction to comfort. And I trust you to raise up what's of you and burn away what's not." Because that's what the cross does. It refines, it reveals, it resurrects. And here is the beauty buried in the pain. Jesus didn't go to the cross begrudgingly. He went with joy. Not because He enjoyed the suffering, but because He saw you on the other side of it. He saw freedom breaking chains, saw hearts being made whole, saw generations being healed through one act of perfect obedience. And now He invites you to carry that same mindset, to pick up your cross daily and follow, not out of fear, but out of love, not out of obligation, but out of revelation. Because when you finally see the hidden meaning of the cross, you realize it's not a symbol of death anymore. It's a signpost to destiny, a roadmap for resurrection, and a call to live crucified so that Christ may live through you. And if the enemy has been whispering that you're too broken, too far gone, too dirty to ever be whole, again remind him that Jesus didn't bleed for the polished, and the perfect. He bled for the prodigals, the addicts, the ashamed, the angry, the abandoned. And He bled to bring you back to the Father, not as a slave, not as a project, but as an heir. And when you live from the cross, you stop trying to fix yourself and start letting the Spirit do what only He can, cutting away what's dead, breathing into what's dormant, and leading you step by step into the life you were always meant to live. So, let the cross do its work. Let it wound your pride so it can heal your soul. Let it end what was never meant to survive in you, and raise up what hell tried to bury. Because the cross is not the end, it's where your real story begins. What if I told you that every time you choose to forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, every time you choose humility over pride, obedience over comfort, and surrender over control, you're living out the cross in real time? Because the cross wasn't just a moment in history. It's a posture in the present, a daily dying so something greater can live through you. And that's the hidden power the enemy desperately hopes you overlook. You weren't called to admire the cross. You were called to carry it. Not because God wants you miserable, but because He wants you free. And freedom never comes without a fight, without a death, without a letting go of everything you think makes you strong. The flesh screams for recognition, applause, validation, but the cross silences all of that, because what it kills is what was killing you, and what it resurrects is what was always meant to live. Too many people think Christianity is about sin management, behavior tweaking, or trying harder. But the truth is far more radical. God never came to make you a better version of your old self. He came to kill that self entirely and birth something eternal in its place. And that only happens when you finally stop negotiating with God and lay everything down: your plans, your fears, your timelines, your image, your past, and say, God, if the cross was enough for you to give everything, then I give you everything too. And in that surrender, something supernatural begins to happen, not just in your circumstances, but in your mind. Your desires, your vision, and your spiritual authority. Suddenly, the same cross that once looked like defeat becomes your greatest weapon, your place of clarity, the altar where confusion dies and purpose is born. Because the more time you spend at the foot of the cross, the less power sin has. The less you care about the opinions of people, and the more heaven begins to pour through your life like a rushing river. And maybe that's what you've been missing. Not another conference, not another strategy, but a raw, honest return to the place where blood bought your breakthrough and grace shattered your chains. The cross is where you stop running, stop pretending, stop hiding, and finally allow God to deal with the parts of you you've tried to protect, because until He breaks it, He can't bless it, and what you refuse to place on the altar will eventually own you. But when you place it at the cross, it loses its grip, and something holy begins to rise. Something the devil can't counterfeit, religion can't replicate, and culture can't silence. It's the kind of fire that makes you dangerous to darkness, not because you're crucified. Because you're crucified, because your old self no longer gets the final say, and Christ now speaks through your surrendered life. That's what Paul meant when he said, "I die daily," not out of self-pity, but out of power, because every death to self is an invitation to walk in the Spirit, to carry the presence of God with purity and boldness, and to release heaven wherever your feet touch the ground. And if you've been waiting for a sign that it's time to stop playing it safe, stop living halfway in and halfway out, this is it, because the cross is not just a one-time yes. It's a daily decision to let go, lay down, and step into a glory that only comes through surrender. The most dangerous believer is not the loudest, the most famous, or the most gifted. The one who's been to the cross and never recovered. The one who let it strip them of everything false, who let it break them and remake them, who walks in quiet authority because they know what it costs to be free, and they won't waste it trying to impress anyone. And the truth is, there's a kind of peace you only find when you've been crucified with Christ, a kind of joy that doesn't come from circumstances, but from knowing nothing owns you anymore, not sin, not fear, not shame, not your past, not the expectations of others, because when Jesus died, everything that tried to destroy you died with Him. And when He rose, everything that was eternal in you came alive. That's the power you carry when you live from the cross, not religious hype, but holy authority. Not borrowed confidence, but blood-bought identity. And once you taste it, nothing else satisfies. The hidden meaning of the cross is this: was never just about Jesus dying so you could be forgiven. It was about Jesus dying so you could be awakened. And there's a big difference between being forgiven and being free. Too many people stop at the cross like it's a final destination, when really, it's a launching pad, the place where grace meets grit, where mercy births movement, and where surrender unlocks supernatural authority. The blood didn't just cleanse your recorded, transferred your identity and your access, moving you out of bondage and into sonship. But you'll never live like a son or daughter if you keep thinking like a slave. And that's exactly what the enemy wants, to keep you bowed under guilt, shame, and performance-driven religion. Because once you start walking in the revelation of what the cross accomplished, the gates of hell can't stop you. You stop begging God for what's already yours, and you start declaring, walking and warring with the boldness of someone who knows they are backed by the full weight of heaven. But here, where it gets deeper. The cross didn't just reconcile you to God. Expose the counterfeit systems you've been trusting in, systems that look spiritual but are secretly draining your soul. It exposes your idols, your crutches, your secret dependencies, and forces you to decide, do you want comfort or do you want calling? Because you can't carry both, and the cross demands you choose. When Jesus said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily," he was issuing an invitation that very few accept, because denial of self is not trendy, it's not convenient, and it won't make you popular, but it will make you powerful. Powerful in the Spirit, powerful in prayer, powerful in identity. Because when you stop living for you, you make room for God to live through you. The cross is the narrow road, and many avoid it because it means dying to the image you've built, the plans you've made, and the version of Christianity that never costs you anything. But that kind of faith never flips cities, never breaks curses, never heals trauma, and never scares demons. Only crucified ones carry that kind of weight. And the reason so many feel spiritually dry is because they try to carry anointing without sacrifice, glory without groaning, power without process. But the cross is the process, and it's brutal, and the best weight strips you, humbles you, empties you, so that what remains is pure, tested, and untouchable by the tactics of the enemy. The devil isn't afraid of your gifting, he's afraid of your dying. Because when you've died with Christ, the hooks of sin, fear, rejection, and pride no longer work on you, and you become dangerous by default. And let's be clear, the cross doesn't remove the battle. It shifts the battleground, because you stop fighting for victory and start fighting from it, knowing the outcome is already sealed. The blood already speaks, and the name of Jesus already reigns. You walk differently, think differently, pray differently, but from the abundance of a finished work that took place on a bloody hill 2,000 years ago. And the real tragedy is that too many churches teach the cross as a concept, but never as a confrontation. They preach grace, but not death to self. They'll celebrate resurrection, but skip crucifixion. They'll hand you a promise, but never walk you through the processing, so people stay stuck. Saved, but silent. Redeemed, but restless. Forgiven, but fruitless. But the cross is calling again. And it's not asking for part of you, asking for all of you. Not because God is cruel, but because He knows what He can resurrect when He has every piece. Your full surrender is heaven's green light to unleash what been locked inside of you, all along purpose. Authority, clarity, fire. The reason you've been circling the same cycles might just be because you've been avoiding the one place where true change happens. The cross, where your will ends and God's will begins. And if you're tired of shallow religion, if you're done with surface level breakthrough, if you're ready to burn for something real, go back to the cross, not as a tourist, but as a living sacrifice. Lay down everything and let the fire fall again. There's a fire that only falls on sacrifice, and that's why the cross is not just about pain, it's about power, because when something dies in you that was never supposed to live, what rises in its place is unshakable authority, the kind hell can't replicate and religion can't explain. And maybe you've been wondering why the fire you once had has dimmed, why your prayers feel shallow, why your faith feels more like performance than passion. Probably because the altar has been empty and the cross has been treated like a symbol instead of your source. The early church didn't preach self-help or personal success. They preached Christ crucified, not because they were obsessed with death, but because they understood that resurrection only comes after something dies. And the reason your calling feels delayed may not be because God is holding back, because you are. Because what He's asking for, isn't more noise or more effort, as more surrender, and the cross is the only place where real surrender happens. And if we're honest, we've been taught to sanitize the cross, to reduce it to a necklace or a church logo, when in reality it was a slaughter site, a place of agony, blood, and supernatural victory, all in one. You don't stand near it and stay the same. You don't behold it and walk away unchanged, because something in you either dies or hardens. And the cross will always expose what you've been protecting. Maybe it's control, maybe it's fear, maybe it's that silent vow you made to never be hurt again, to never fully trust again. But the cross is calling that part of you to die so the real you can finally live. The part that's not built on trauma or performance, but on truth and intimacy with the one who loved you before you ever failed or succeeded. And the mystery of the cross is that it breaks you to build you, wounds you to heal you, and empties you so you can be filled not with cheap substitutes, but with the Spirit of God Himself, the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. The same Spirit that empowers you to cast out demons, walk in holiness, and carry peace into chaos. And here, as the truth most avoid, you can carry your cross and your comfort at the same time, and you never experience the glory of resurrection while clinging to the grave clothes of your old life. Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb. The cross isn't where your story ends, it's where the false version of you ends. The version shaped by fear, by rejection, by sin, by shame, by what they did to you and what you did to yourself. Because at the cross, God made a public announcement that your past no longer has the power to define your future. This is the part most believers miss. The cross didn't just defeat sin, it disarmed everything connected to it, including the identities you built in pain, the masks you wore to survive, and the lies you believed to feel safe. Those died too, and if you don't let them stay buried, you'll spend your life trying to carry what Jesus already carried, trying to earn what he already paid for, trying to fight battles he already won. The hidden meaning of the cross is that it didn't just remove the penalty of sin. It removed the permission sin had to label you, rule you, and limit you. And once you see that, you stop tolerating things that look normal but are spiritually illegal in your life, like anxiety, guilt, addiction, confusion, because those things are trespassers on blood-bought land. And the only reason they stay is if you don't evict them with truth. You begin to realize that the cross wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a divine reversal where what was meant to kill you gave birth to the greatest victory, where the tool of torture became the throne of triumph, and where the most brutal death brought forth the most beautiful redemption. And God didn't just use the cross to save you. He used it to make a mockery of the enemy, to strip the devil of all his accusations, and show the world what love looks like when it bleeds. And that love is still bleeding for you, still reaching for you, still calling out through every scar. You are not who you were. You are not what they called you. You are not the worst thing you've ever done, or the worst thing that's ever been done to you. You are mine. And when that hits your spirit, when the weight of what Jesus endured for you becomes real, not just the nails or the crown, or you are not the worst they into pito p up bb we are re you are we are are we are are we are we are we you 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 we all see you with fruits of the UK. We you can where you were but the separation from the Father, the rejection by man, the full wrath of sin and death absorbed into his body, so you never have to carry it against something in you, breaks open, not in despair, but in deep deliverance. Because now you understand, he didn't just die for you. He died as you, he became sin, so that you could become righteous. He became cursed, so that you could be blessed. He became wounded, so that you could be healed. And if that's true, and it is, then why are you still walking like you're bound? Why are you still accepting torment as normal? Why are you still begging God for peace when the Prince of Peace already gave you His Spirit? The problem is sin, that God hasn't moved. The problem is you haven't stood at the cross long enough to realize what He already finished, what He already transferred, what He already tore down and rebuilt in you. And the longer you try to earn what's already yours, the longer you'll stay stuck in cycles that grace already broke, the longer you'll pray for what's been unlocked, and the longer you'll fight battles that no longer belong to you. But when you finally believe the cross is enough, not just for your forgiveness, but for your freedom, then you'll walk different, talk different, live different, because the old has truly gone and the new has come. The cross isn't just where you kneel, it's where you rise. When Jesus said, "It is finished," He wasn't just declaring the end of His suffering, He was announcing the end of your separation, the end of your striving, the end of your spiritual orphanhood. And yet, many still live like it isn't finished, walking around as if they're still on trial, still trying to prove their worth, still trying to earn a place at the table God already set for them in the presence of their enemies. But that S, the deception, the enemy, doesn't have to steal your destiny if he can convince you re-disqualified from it. And he does it by getting you to overlook the cross, to treat it like a moment instead of a movement, like a past event instead of a present victory. The cross is not a relic, it's a revolution, the single greatest upheaval of power in all of history, where hell lost its grip and heaven gained ground in your soul. And when you live from that reality, fear begins to shrink, shame begins to dissolve, and your voice gets louder. Not because you're confident in yourself, but because you're convinced of the blood. And let's be honest, some of us haven't fully embraced the cross because deep down, we don't believe we're worth that kind of love, that kind of sacrifice, that kind of rescue. We've been conditioned by rejection, scarred by betrayal, wounded by religion. So we flinch at grace and resist surrender because it feels unsafe, unfamiliar, even suspicious. But the cross cuts through all of that with one act of unrelenting love. A love that didn't wait for your permission or require your performance, but ran ahead to the hill called Golgotha, stretched out holy arms, and bore the full weight of what you couldn't carry. And that as what the hidden meaning of the cross reveals, it wasn't just about punishing sin. It was about removing everything that kept you from the Father. Everything that told you you had to strive to be seen. Everything that convinced you love was conditional and favor was earned. The cross destroyed that lie once and for all. But the freedom only becomes real when you decide to believe it, not just in your theology, but in your identity. That's when transformation begins, not with behavior, but with belief. Because the root of bondage is never just sin, it's deception. And the cross is where the lie dies. The lie that you're unlovable, unworthy, irredeemable, that dies at the cross. The lie that God is distant, angry, silent, that dies at the cross. The lie that you'll always be stuck, always be bound, always be less than, that dies at the cross. And when those lies die, you come alive, not with hype, but with holy confidence, not with unshakable peace. And the things that used to tempt you don't tempt you the same. The things that used to control you lose their grip, because the cross didn't just change your record, changed your nature. And you begin to think differently, desire differently, and walk differently. Not because of religion, but because of resurrection. But here's the danger: you don't return to the cross often. You'll forget who you are. You'll slip into performance, comparison, and compromise, because the world will scream its labels, and the enemy will whisper condemnation. But the cross always tells the truth, that you are loved, chosen, washed, filled, and free. And if you've drifted, if you've grown numb, if you've made peace with bondage, go back to the cross, not with guilt, but with hunger, because everything you need is still found there. Healing, clarity, purpose, fire, it's all waiting where the blood still speaks and the veil is still torn. The hidden meaning of the cross is that it never stops speaking, because what Jesus did on that hill still echoes through every battlefield of your life, not just as a memory, but as an active force, a supernatural authority that silences the voice of the accuser every time he tries to remind you of your past. And this is where most believers get stuck. They think the cross was just a solution for sin, but it was actually a transfer of identity, a divine exchange where everything that belonged to you, guilt, fear, condemnation, was placed on him, and everything that belonged to him, righteousness, peace, authority, was placed on you. But if you don't grasp that, you live like you still paying off a debt that's already being cancelled. And that's exactly what the enemy wants, to keep you distracted by your behavior, so you never step into your birthright. And let's be real, it's easier to be busy with spiritual activity than it is to die to self. Easier to volunteer than it is to lay down your pride. Easier to memorize verses than it is to crucify your ego. But the cross doesn't ask for your productivity, asks for your death. Because only what dies can be raised, and God will not anoint what he hasn't first broken. The reason you feel the pressure, isn't because God is punishing you, because he is pressing you, shaping you, preparing to pour new wine. But new wine requires crushed grapes. And the cross is the crushing place where your false identity is stripped, so your true calling can be revealed. And some of you are in that exact place right now. It is allowing the breaking, not to destroy you, but to deliver you from what's been limiting you. And if you try to escape it, you'll miss what the cross is trying to do in you. Produce something eternal. To know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. Because resurrection power doesn't come without crucified flesh. And glory doesn't fall on what hasn't been surrendered. And here's the secret. The more you die, the more alive you become, not to the world, but to the Spirit. And the things that used to seduce you no longer hold your attention. The wounds that used to define you no longer hurt the same. Because you've been with the one who bled and didn't quit. The one who was mocked and didn't retaliate. The one who had every reason to walk away, but stayed nailed to that tree for you. And now you carry that cross to not in shame, but in power. Not as a victim, but as a vessel. Because crucified ones are dangerous ones. And the enemy knows he can't manipulate someone who's already laid down their life. So if you feel like you're losing everything, if it seems like God is stripping everything away, don't panic, thank him. Because he's pruning what can't go with you, cutting off what's choking the fruit, and bringing you back to the place of power, the cross, the holy intersection of death and destiny, where Jesus didn't just make a way, he became the way, and now calls you to walk it daily, not with performance, but with passion, not with fear, but with fire. And when you do, you'll realize the cross was never a loss, was the greatest exchange in human history. And now, it's your turn to live like it matters. The cross reveals a truth so shocking that many rejected. Your identity is not found in your achievements, your struggles, or even your faithfulness, but in the finished work of Jesus, who took every shame, every failure, and every chain and nailed it to that tree. And if you continue to define yourself by your past mistakes or the labels others have given you, you're living in spiritual bondage, blind to the freedom already purchased for you. Galatians 2:20 reminds us that it is no longer we who live, but Christ who lives in us. And that truth means your old self died with him. Yet many still carry the weight of that old self like a backpack full of stones. The hidden meaning of the cross is that it, not just an event, but a daily reality. Each day you choose to live crucified with Christ, putting to death the desires of the flesh and the lies of the enemy that whisper in your ear, reminding you that you are unworthy, unloved, or forgotten. And here, a secret many never tell you. The enemy's greatest weapon against God as chosen is deception. And he uses shame and condemnation to keep you from walking fully in your inheritance. But the cross breaks those chains, shattering every stronghold. And what you may not realize is that the cross is also a battlefield, a place of warfare where the powers of darkness tried to claim victory but were utterly defeated. And when you live from the cross, you live from that victory, carrying a spiritual authority that trembles hell itself. But that authority comes with a cost. It requires dying daily to your own ambitions, your comfort zones, your need for approval, and your fears, because the cross calls for radical surrender, not partial commitment. And the moment you try to hold back part of your heart, you lose the power that comes from full obedience. And many settle for religious routines instead of resurrection life, for rules instead of relationship, and for approval instead of intimacy with God. But the cross demands more. It demands that you lay down your life as Jesus did, trusting that in losing it, you will find it. And the hidden meaning of the cross goes beyond personal salvation. A call to participate in God's mission to redeem a broken world, to carry the message of hope and healing to those still in chains. Because the cross doesn't just free you, it commissions you, empowering you with boldness, courage, and compassion to be His hands and feet in a hurting world. And that's why the cross is offensive to the world, because it calls people out of darkness and into light, out of death and into life, breaking systems of injustice and tearing down walls of division. And if you shy away from the cost, you'll never fully step into the power. But when you embrace the cross, you tap into a supernatural strength, a divine purpose, and an eternal legacy that no one can steal or diminish, because it is founded not on fleeting human efforts, but on the unchanging, victorious sacrifice of Christ. So the challenge for you is clear. Will you live as one who is crucified with Christ, dying daily to self and rising daily in power? Or will you continue to carry the weight of what the cross already removed? The choice is yours, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The cross stands as the ultimate symbol of love, sacrifice, and redemption. But its true power remains hidden unless you engage with it as a living reality that transforms your every moment. Many reduce it to a historical fact or religious icon, missing that the cross was God's radical answer to the brokenness in your soul. A supernatural exchange that goes beyond forgiveness to renewal and restoration. Imagine that the blood Jesus shed did not only cancel your debts, but also purchased a new nature for you, a divine inheritance marked by power, peace, and purpose. And that every time you align your life with that reality, you tap into an eternal source of strength that shakes the very foundations Yet, so often, the enemy convinces you to settle for less, to remain in cycles of doubt, fear, and defeat because you haven't fully embraced the cross's ongoing authority. The authority to overcome sin, sickness, despair, and every scheme designed to steal your destiny. And here's the shocking truth: when you truly understand the cross, it becomes your identity's anchor, not your past, not your pain, not your failures, because the cross says, you are made new, and that newness isn't temporary or conditional, but permanent and unconditional. But the enemy hates that message and will do everything to keep you distracted through busyness, entertainment, religious hypocrisy, or spiritual apathy, because he knows the moment you grasp the cross's full meaning, you become a threat to his kingdom. And the cross is not just about what Jesus endured, but about what you endure with him, because to walk in resurrection power, you must first walk in crucifixion willingness, daily choosing to lay down your rights, your reputation, your ambitions, and your comfort, allowing God to do a work in you that no seminar or motivational talk can replicate. And it's in that crucifixion that the Spirit moves powerfully, producing fruit that transform not only your life, but ripple out to impact families, communities, and nations. And the cross reveals a divine paradox. To live, you must die. But that death is not defeats the most profound victory you will ever experience, because it frees you from every chain that held you captive, and ushers you into a life marked by boldness, joy, and divine purpose. And if you're honest, you know there is a hunger inside that no worldly success can satisfy. Hunger only the cross can fill, because it connects you to the heart of God, to a love that never fails, and a grace that never runs dry. So then, settle for a shallow understanding or a distant admiration of the cross. Dive deep into its reality. Let it break what needs breaking, heal what needs healing, and raise you up into a destiny so glorious that nothing in this world compares. The cross is calling you to come alive in a way you never thought possible, to live as a testament of God's incredible power to turn death into life and sorrow into joy. And that call is urgent, because the world desperately needs witnesses who have been transformed by its hidden meaning. Will you answer that call today and live like the cross is your lifeline and your legacy? You must understand the cross as more than a symbol. It is the epicenter of a spiritual revolution that demands your total surrender and promises total transformation. Far too many Christians treat the cross like a ritual or a souvenir, but it's a dynamic encounter that confronts every part of your life, every lie you've believed, and every fear you've hidden, calling you out of your comfort zone into a place where true power is born. And this power isn't about flashy gifts or public recognition. It's a quiet, it's unshakable strength, rooted in the fact that the ultimate sacrifice has already been made on your behalf. And now you are called to live in the victory of that sacrifice daily. Jesus' crucifixion was a scandal to the world, a stumbling block to the proud, and a foolishness to those who rely on human wisdom. But to those who believe, it is the power of God for salvation, freedom, and authority. And that authority includes dominion over sin, fear, and even death itself. Because the cross broke the chains that bound humanity for centuries. But here's where most people miss it. Living under the cross means dying to self repeatedly, not occasionally, because the flesh will constantly try to reclaim its throne through pride, selfishness, and rebellion. And only by taking up your cross daily can you keep it in submission. The cross reveals that true freedom is costly and requires ongoing surrender. But it also shows you the price has already been paid, so you can walk boldly without condemnation or shame. And the cross invites you into a lifestyle of radical love, where you love not only in good times, but through suffering and rejection, reflecting Jesus' example, who loved even those who nailed him to the cross. This kind of love is contagious and disruptive, shakes communities and changes hearts, but it requires strength that only comes from abiding in the cross's power. The cross also exposes the lies of the enemy by showing you that your failures, disqualify you, and your past, dictate your future. Because the blood on that cross washed every stain away and wrote a new story for you. But it requires faith to live that story, faith that says no to despair, no to bitterness, and yes to grace, hope, and resurrection power. And as you live from the cross, you become a living witness of God's transformative grace, a beacon in a dark world, and a reminder that no matter how broken or lost you feel, the cross is where healing begins, restoration happens, and destiny unfolds. So don't let this powerful truth remain hidden. Embrace the cross as your daily reality. Let it change you from the inside out, and watch how it revolutionizes not only your life, but everyone around you. The cross is the ultimate paradox of Christianity, where the highest glory and the deepest suffering meet, where death becomes life, and where loss turns into gain. If you've been living your faith like it's about comfort or convenience, it's time for a reality check. Because the cross demands something radical. Your willingness to be broken, to be emptied, and to be transformed. And while the world runs from pain, the cross runs toward it, because it understands that only through brokenness can the fullness of God's power be released in your life. The hidden meaning of the cross is that your suffering is not meaningless or random. but part of a divine process that molds you into the image of Christ, shaping your character, refining your faith, and preparing you to carry the glory of God wherever you go. And if you resist that process, you'll remain stuck, frustrated, and powerless, longing for breakthrough, but never fully stepping into it. Because the cross is the crucible where your faith is tested and your destiny forged. And this isn't just about personal growth. It's about your role in God's kingdom, about being a vessel through which heaven touches earth, a light in the darkness, and a voice of truth in a world that desperately needs it. And that role requires courage, boldness, and a heart willing to suffer for what is right. Because the cross is not a suggestion, it's a command, a daily call to pick up your cross and follow Jesus, even when it's hard, unpopular, or painful. But here's the good news: the cross is not a burden you carry alone. It's the place where Jesus meets you in your weakness, strengthens you in your struggle, and empowers you to overcome every challenge. And that empowerment comes not from human effort, but from the Holy Spirit, who lives within you, guiding you, comforting you, and filling you with power from on high. And as you embrace the cross, you'll find a new kind of joy that transcends circumstances, a peace that guards your heart and mind, and a love that overflows through you to others. So, don't shrink back from the cross or treat it as a distant relic. Lean into it. Let it break you and remake you, and watch how God uses your surrendered life to impact generations. Because the cross is not just about what Jesus did long ago. It's about what He is doing now.